In a distant corner of the galaxy, an alien race known as the Arbiters sent out a call. They summoned beings from countless worlds to take part in what they called the ultimate test. It was said that this test would determine which species deserved to survive and thrive in the universe. Failure meant extinction. The stakes were unimaginably high. Humanity's representatives were Alex Carter, a former soldier with quick reflexes and a sharp mind, and Mia Lopes, a brilliant scientist who specialized in studying alien life. Both had been chosen for their unique skills and ability to adapt under pressure. When they arrived at the testing grounds, they found themselves standing on a barren planet surrounded by strange plants and towering rock formations. The air was thick with tension, and the sky above glowed faintly with unfamiliar colors. Around them, other species gathered. Some looked like massive insects with shimmering exoskeletons, while others seemed to be made entirely of light or liquid metal. There were creatures with too many eyes, too many limbs, and voices that sounded more like clicks and hums than words. Everyone was wary, sizing each other up as if trying to guess who might pose the greatest threat. Among these groups stood the Deathworlders. Their name alone inspired fear across the galaxy. Hailing from a planet so dangerous that survival itself was considered an art form, they carried an aura of calm confidence. Their leader, Jake Rivers, was a tall, scarred man with piercing blue eyes and a voice that commanded attention. Beside him stood Clara Hayes, his second-in-command, whose quiet demeanor masked a fierce intelligence. Unlike the others, the Deathworlders didn't seem nervous or even particularly interested. If anything, they appeared amused. The Arbiters finally spoke, their voices echoing in everyone's minds rather than through sound. "Welcome," they said. "You have been brought here to prove your worth. Each challenge will test your strength, your wit, and your will to survive. Those who fail will perish. Those who succeed may earn the right to continue existing." As soon as the message ended, the first task began. A massive wall rose from the ground, stretching higher than anyone could see. At its base lay scattered tools, ropes, hooks, and strange devices no one recognized. Most teams immediately scrambled to figure out how to climb it. The insectoids worked together, forming living ladders, while the energy-based beings floated upward effortlessly. Others relied on brute force, hammering away at the wall until it cracked. Alex and Mia exchanged a glance. "We need to think this through," Maya said softly. She knelt down to examine the tools, her fingers brushing against something that looked like a grappling hook. Alex nodded, scanning the area for potential hazards. He noticed movement near the base of the wall. Small, shadowy figures darted between the rocks. Predators, perhaps, waiting to strike when someone fell. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders simply walked toward the wall without hesitation. Jake grabbed a nearby rope, tied it into a makeshift harness, and began scaling the surface with astonishing speed. Clara followed close behind, moving with practiced ease. Within minutes, they reached the top and looked down at the chaos below. Jake let out a low chuckle. "This is going to be fun," he muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Back on the ground, Alex and Mia devised a plan. Using Maya's knowledge of physics and Alex's experience with climbing, they managed to secure a stable path upward. As they ascended, they couldn't help but notice how different their approach was compared to the others. While some relied on sheer power or advanced technology, humanity's representatives focused on teamwork and ingenuity. By the time they reached the summit, exhaustion weighed heavily on them. But when they saw the Deathworlders casually leaning against a boulder, smirking as though they'd just finished a leisurely stroll, Alex couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and admiration. "What's so funny?" he asked, unable to keep the edge out of his voice. Jake tilted his head, his grin widening. "Oh, nothing," he replied. "Just watching everyone else struggle. Don't worry, kid. You're doing better than most." With that cryptic comment hanging in the air, the next phase of the trial began. And already, it was clear that surviving wouldn't just depend on skill, It would require understanding the true nature of the game they were playing. After the first challenge, the group of survivors moved forward into a vast canyon. The air was dry and hot, and the ground beneath their feet crunched with every step. Strange noises echoed off the towering cliffs. Growls, hisses, and the occasional screech that made everyone uneasy. Alex Carter kept one hand on the weapon strapped to his side while Mia Loeb scanned the area, her sharp eyes picking out details others might miss. The canyon was filled with predators. Some were large, lumbering beasts with armored hides and rows of jagged teeth. Others were smaller but no less dangerous, darting in and out of shadows like living blades. Most teams immediately tried to fight their way through. The insectoids unleashed bursts of energy from their weapons, while the liquid metal beings formed spiked appendages to fend off attackers. But these efforts often backfired. The larger beasts shrugged off laser blasts as if they were nothing more than annoying sparks, and the smaller creatures swarmed over anything that stood still for too long. Alex and Mia took a different approach. "We can't win by fighting them all," Mia whispered, pulling Alex behind a cluster of rocks. "We need to be smart." She pointed to a narrow path along the edge of the canyon wall. It looked treacherous, barely wide enough for one person to walk on, but it seemed clear of predators. If we stay quiet and use distractions, we might slip past. They worked together, using loose stones and fallen branches to create diversions. When a particularly aggressive beast charged toward the noise, they dashed across open spaces, keeping low and moving quickly. It wasn't easy. More than once, Alex had to pull Mia back just before a claw or tail nearly struck her, but they made steady progress. By the time they reached the end of the canyon, both were sweating and breathing hard but alive. The Deathworlders, however, handled things differently. Jake Rivers and Clara Hayes didn't bother sneaking or avoiding danger. Instead, they walked straight into the heart of the chaos, laughing as predators lunged at them. Jake swung a heavy metal rod he picked up earlier, smashing it into the skull of a charging beast. Clara moved like a dancer, dodging attacks and striking with precision. Every movement was calculated yet casual, as if they were dealing with nothing more than pests. "This isn't even breakfast," Jake said loudly, wiping blood off his arm after taking down another creature. His voice carried through the canyon, drawing startled looks from the other contestants. To most, the Deathworlders' confidence bordered on madness, but there was no denying their effectiveness. Within minutes, the immediate threat was neutralized, leaving a trail of defeated predators in their wake. Mia watched them with a mix of awe and unease. "How do they do that?" she murmured to Alex. "It's like they don't feel fear." Alex shook his head. Maybe they've faced worse, or maybe they're just crazy. As the group regrouped beyond the canyon, tensions began to rise. Supplies were running low, and tempers flared as teams argued over who should take the lead. A reptilian species with shimmering green scales accused humanity of hoarding resources, pointing accusing claws at Alex and Mia. Before Alex could respond, Jake stepped between them, his expression cold and unyielding. "You want trouble?" Jake asked, his voice dangerously calm. He held up the same metal rod he used earlier, now stained with dried blood. "Because I'll give you trouble." The reptilians hesitated, then backed away, clearly unwilling to test Jake's threat. Clara smirked, leaning against a nearby rock. "Smart choice," she said, her tone light but carrying an undertone of menace. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the landscape, Mia approached Jake and Clara cautiously. "Why did you help us?" she asked, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Jake shrugged. "We like underdogs," he replied simply. Then, after a pause, he added, "Besides, watching idiots fail is half the fun." Clara chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Don't read too much into it. We're not your friends." Mia nodded slowly, unsure whether to feel grateful or wary. As she returned to Alex, She couldn't shake the feeling that the Deathworlders were playing a game only they understood, and somehow humanity had become a part of it. The next challenge took the group into a dense jungle, its thick canopy blocking out most of the light. The air was humid and heavy, filled with the scent of wet earth and strange, unfamiliar flowers. Every step forward felt like pushing through a wall of leaves and vines. Alex Carter hacked at the overgrowth with a small blade, clearing a path for himself and Maya Lopes. They moved carefully, knowing that danger could be hiding anywhere. Mia kept her eyes on the plants around them. "Be careful," she warned softly. "Some of these might be poisonous." She pointed to a cluster of bright red berries hanging from a nearby bush. "Those look tempting, but they could kill you if you eat them." Sure enough, a few moments later, one of the insectoid teams stumbled upon a similar plant. One of their members reached out curiously, plucking a berry and popping it into their mouth. Within seconds, they collapsed, twitching violently as their companions tried desperately to help. The rest of the group watched in stunned silence as the victim was carried away, leaving behind only eerie quiet. Alex tightened his grip on his weapon. "This place is a death trap," he muttered under his breath. "We need to keep moving." Mia nodded, crouching down to examine the ground. She noticed faint tracks, claw marks etched into the soil, and pointed them out to Alex. "Something big has been here recently," she said. "And whatever it is, it's probably still close." As they pressed on, the Deathworlders once again stood apart from the others. Jake Rivers and Clara Hayes didn't bother avoiding the dangerous plants or watching for predators. Instead, they walked straight through the jungle as though it posed no threat. When a massive, snake-like creature slithered down from the trees above, jaws wide open, Jake simply grabbed a fallen branch and swung it like a club. The impact sent the creature recoiling, hissing in pain before retreating into the shadows. Clara knelt beside a patch of glowing mushrooms, plucking one and inspecting it closely. "Edible," she declared after a moment, biting into it without hesitation. Her casualness unnerved the other contestants, who continued to tiptoe around every potential hazard. Mia tried to focus on survival, using her knowledge of biology to guide them safely through the jungle. She identified certain plants as safe sources of food and water, while warning Alex about others that could cause harm. Together, they managed to stay ahead of the worst dangers, though neither of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched. At one point, they came across a clearing where several teams had set up camp. Exhaustion had taken its toll, and many were too tired to continue. Some argued over dwindling supplies, while others sat silently, staring blankly into the distance. It was clear that morale was crumbling. Jake and Clara passed by the group without slowing down, offering only a dismissive glance. "Pathetic," Jake muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "If you can't handle this, you don't deserve to survive." His words sparked anger among the survivors, but no one dared confront him directly. Even Alex clenched his fists, resisting the urge to snap back. Mia placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Don't let him get to you," she whispered. "He's trying to rattle us." By the time night fell, the jungle grew even darker and more menacing. Strange noises echoed all around: growls, rustling leaves, and distant screams. Alex and Mia huddled together near a makeshift fire, trying to stay warm and alert. Despite their efforts, sleep came in short bursts, interrupted by sudden movements or sounds. In contrast, the Deathworlders seemed completely at ease. Jake leaned against a tree, sharpening the edge of his makeshift weapon, while Clara cleaned dirt from beneath her nails. Neither showed any sign of fear or fatigue. When Alex caught Jake's eye across the firelight, the man gave him a sly grin. "Still alive, huh?" Jake said, his tone mocking yet oddly approving. "Good job. Now let's see how long you last." Mia frowned, leaning closer to Alex. "They're not just competing," she whispered. "They're testing us, watching to see what we'll do." Alex nodded slowly, realizing she was right. The Deathworlders weren't just participants. They were observers, judging everyone else's actions. And somehow, humanity had become part of their experiment. The fourth challenge brought the remaining contestants to a wide, open desert. The ground was cracked and dry, stretching endlessly in every direction under a blazing sun. There were no trees, no shade, and no sign of water. The heat pressed down on everyone like a heavy blanket, making it hard to breathe or think clearly. Alex Carter wiped sweat from his brow as he scanned the horizon, searching for any clue about what they were supposed to do next. Mia Lopes knelt beside him, examining the dusty ground. "This is going to be tough," she said quietly. "No shelter, no resources, just us against the elements." Her voice carried a note of concern, but her eyes remained sharp, taking in every detail around them. Other teams struggled visibly. Some tried digging into the earth, hoping to find moisture beneath the surface. Others wandered aimlessly, growing weaker with each passing hour. A few collapsed entirely, their bodies unable to handle the extreme conditions. It was clear that this test wasn't just about solving puzzles or fighting enemies. It was about endurance. Jake Rivers and Clara Hayes, however, seemed unfazed. They walked steadily through the desert, their steps measured and confident. When Alex and Mia passed by them briefly, Jake glanced over with a smirk. "You're doing better than most," he remarked casually, as if commenting on the weather. "But you're still too slow." Alex bit back a retort, focusing instead on keeping himself and Mia moving forward. He knew better than to waste energy arguing with someone who thrived in situations like this. Still, Jake's words lingered in his mind, gnawing at his confidence. As the hours dragged on, the lack of water began to take its toll. Alex felt dizzy, his throat parched and his head pounding. Mia wasn't faring much better, her usually steady hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the straps of her pack. She spotted a small, thorny plant in the distance and motioned for Alex to follow her. "Maybe we can use this," she said weakly, pointing to its roots. Sometimes plants store water underground. They worked together, carefully digging around the base of the plant until they uncovered a cluster of fibrous roots. Breaking one open revealed a trickle of liquid. Not much, but enough to wet their mouths and give them a sliver of relief. It wasn't perfect, but it kept them going. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders continued their relentless pace. At one point, Clara stopped to examine a patch of sand, brushing away the top layer to reveal a hidden burrow. Without hesitation, she reached inside and pulled out a wriggling creature, a scorpion-like insect with glowing green markings. She crushed it between two rocks, squeezing out its juices before drinking deeply. Jake watched her with an approving nod. "Good call," he said simply. When night finally fell, the temperature plummeted, leaving everyone shivering in the sudden cold. Alex and Mia huddled together, sharing body heat to stay warm. Around them, other teams argued or broke down completely, their unity crumbling under the strain. Some even resorted to stealing supplies from weaker groups, sparking violent confrontations that left several injured. Through it all, the Deathworlders remained calm. They built a small fire using dried brush they'd collected during the day, sitting close enough to share its warmth, but far enough to avoid drawing attention. Jake leaned back, staring up at the stars with an expression of mild boredom. "This planet isn't so bad," he commented to Clara. "Could be worse." Clara chuckled softly, wrapping her arms around her knees. "You always say that." Alex glanced over at them, feeling a mix of frustration and admiration. How could anyone act so casual in a situation like this? He turned to Mia, who was staring at the flames with a thoughtful look. "What are you thinking?" he asked. Mia hesitated before answering. "I think they're not just competing. They're showing off, proving they don't need anything but themselves to survive. And honestly," she paused, her voice dropping lower, "it's working." Alex frowned, glancing back at the Deathworlders. Their confidence was unsettling, but it also made him wonder if humanity wanted to stand a chance in this trial, or in the galaxy beyond. They might have to learn something from people like Jake and Clara, even if it meant swallowing their pride. By the fifth challenge, tensions among the remaining teams had reached a breaking point. Resources were almost gone, and exhaustion hung over everyone like a dark cloud. The group found themselves in a rocky valley surrounded by steep cliffs, with only one narrow path leading forward. It was clear that whoever controlled the path would have a major advantage, and conflict was inevitable. Alex Carter tightened his grip on his weapon as he noticed a reptilian team eyeing their supplies. The creatures, tall and scaly with glowing yellow eyes, had been watching humanity closely for hours. Their leader, a hulking figure with jagged teeth, stepped forward suddenly, pointing a clawed finger at Alex and Mia Lopes. "You have more than you need," he growled in broken but understandable speech. "Give it to us." Mia instinctively moved closer to Alex, her hands clutching a small bag of dried food they'd scavenged earlier. "We worked hard for this," she said firmly, though her voice wavered slightly. "Find your own." The reptilians didn't respond. They simply advanced, their movements slow but deliberate. Panic spread through Alex's chest, but before he could act, a low, dangerous voice cut through the air. "Back off." Jake Rivers stood nearby, his arms crossed and his expression cold. Clara Hayes was beside him, her sharp gaze locked onto the reptilians like a predator sizing up prey. The sudden appearance of the Deathworlders made the atmosphere even tenser. The reptilian leader hissed angrily, turning toward Jake. "This does not concern you," he spat. "Stay out of our way." Jake smirked, taking a step forward. "Oh, I think it does." He held up a heavy metal rod, the same one he'd used in previous challenges, and gave it a casual twirl. "You want war. We'll give you war." For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a roar, the reptilians charged. But they underestimated the Deathworlders. Jake swung his weapon with brutal precision, knocking one attacker off his feet before pivoting to face another. Clara moved like lightning, dodging strikes and delivering blows that sent the reptilians stumbling backward. Within moments, the attackers were retreating, their leader snarling curses as they disappeared into the shadows. When the dust settled, Alex let out a shaky breath. "Thanks," he said to Jake, though his tone was guarded. He wasn't sure whether to feel grateful or wary. Jake shrugged, brushing dirt off his hands. "Don't mention it. Just remember, we're not doing this because we like you." His piercing blue eyes locked onto Alex. "We do what we want, when we want." "Got it." Clara added nothing, simply walking away without a backward glance. The message was clear. The Deathworlders weren't allies, just opportunists who happened to intervene this time. Later, as Alex and Mia rested near a cluster of boulders, Maya turned to him with a thoughtful frown. "Why did they help us?" she asked softly. "They don't owe us anything." Alex shook his head. "I don't know. Maybe they saw something in us, or maybe they just wanted to prove they could handle those guys better than we could." Mia nodded slowly, still uneasy. "Either way, we owe them, whether we like it or not." As night fell, the survivors set up makeshift camps scattered throughout the valley. Whispers traveled between groups, rumors spreading about the Deathworlders' display of power. Some admired their strength, while others resented it. A hive mind collective, a group of beings connected mentally, began discussing strategy openly, their voices overlapping in eerie unison. "They are unpredictable," one said, "but useful." Jake overheard the comment and chuckled darkly. "Useful," he muttered to Clara. "Let them think what they want. By the time they realize the truth, it'll be too late." Clara smirked, leaning back against a rock. "Truth is, they're all playing catch-up, and we're already 10 steps ahead." Despite their bravado, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that the Deathworlders were hiding something. They weren't just here to compete. They seemed to be studying everyone else, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. As he watched Jake and Clara from a distance, he realized that survival might depend on understanding their motives. But getting close enough to learn anything would mean risking everything. The next morning, the path through the valley opened wider, revealing a massive arena carved into the cliffs. Symbols glowed faintly along its edges, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The Arbiter's voice echoed in everyone's minds once again. Prepare yourselves. The final trial begins now. Alex exchanged a glance with Mia, both of them steeling themselves for what lay ahead. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. The Deathworlders wouldn't hesitate to show everyone exactly why they were feared across the galaxy. The final trial took place inside the glowing arena, a massive circular space surrounded by towering walls etched with strange symbols. The air felt heavy, charged with an energy that made everyone uneasy. Alex Carter and Mia Lopes stood side by side, their eyes scanning the area for clues about what was coming next. Around them, the remaining teams gathered nervously, some whispering among themselves while others stared blankly ahead, their faces pale with fear. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The symbols on the walls lit up brighter, casting eerie shadows across the arena. A voice echoed in everyone's minds. The Arbiters. This is the ultimate test, they said. Face your deepest fears. Only those who conquer them will survive. Before anyone could react, the world around them shifted. Each contestant was pulled into their own personal nightmare, isolated from the others. For Alex, it started with darkness. He found himself back in his old unit, surrounded by the sounds of battle. Explosions thundered in the distance, and screams filled the air. His comrades, one by one, fell, leaving him alone in a wasteland of smoke and ash. No matter how hard he tried to move forward, his legs felt like lead, and guilt weighed heavily on his chest. You failed them, a voice whispered cruelly. It's your fault. Mia's vision was different but equally terrifying. She stood in a lab, its walls lined with tanks containing alien creatures she had studied throughout her career. But something was wrong. The creatures weren't alive. They were dying, collapsing into piles of dust before her eyes. Her notes scattered across the floor, torn and burned beyond recognition. You're not good enough. A cold voice taunted. All your work means nothing. Both Alex and Mia struggled to break free from their illusions. They called out to each other, desperate to find some kind of anchor to reality. Slowly, they began to realize that these visions weren't real. They were fabrications designed to exploit their insecurities. With newfound determination, Alex forced himself to take a step forward, then another. I didn't fail them, he muttered through gritted teeth. I did everything I could. The battlefield faded, replaced by silence. Mia focused on the details of her surroundings, reminding herself that none of it was true. My work matters, she whispered fiercely. One by one, the tanks disappeared, leaving her standing in an empty room. She exhaled sharply, wiping sweat from her brow as the illusion dissolved. The Deathworlders, however, seemed completely unaffected. When Jake Rivers and Clara Hayes emerged from their trials, they looked almost bored. Fear, Jake said aloud, smirking at no one in particular. We eat fear for breakfast. Literally. Their nonchalance infuriated some of the other contestants, who were visibly shaken after facing their own horrors. Alex approached Jake cautiously, curiosity outweighing his frustration. How do you do that? He asked. How do you just ignore it? Jake shrugged. You don't ignore it. You embrace it. Fear is just another tool. If you let it control you, you're dead. If you use it, you win. Clara added quietly, where we come from, fear doesn't get you anywhere. It gets you killed. As the survivors regrouped, the atmosphere grew tense. Some teams accused the Deathworlders of having an unfair advantage, while others silently envied their resilience. Alex and Mia exchanged a glance, both understanding that there was more to the Deathworlders' confidence than met the eye. Their ability to shrug off fear wasn't just strength, it was experience, forged in a lifetime of hardship. When the arbiters spoke again, their tone was colder. Prepare yourselves. The final challenge awaits. The arena transformed once more, this time into a battlefield littered with debris and smoke. Massive biomechanical creatures descended from above, their metallic limbs gleaming menacingly. Armed with weapons that crackled with energy, they advanced without hesitation. Panic erupted among the remaining teams as they scrambled to defend themselves. Jake turned to Alex and Mia, his expression unreadable. "You've got guts," he said simply. "Let's see if you can finish this." With that, the Deathworlders charged into the fray, laughing as they clashed with the biomechanical monstrosities. Alex tightened his grip on his weapon, glancing at Mia. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded, her jaw set firmly. Together, they ran toward the chaos, knowing that survival depended not just on strength or skill, but on refusing to give up, no matter how overwhelming the odds. Months passed, and life on Earth began to settle into a fragile sense of normalcy. The stories of Alex Carter and Mia Lopez inspired nations to unite in ways they never had before. Research facilities sprang up around the globe, dedicated to studying alien technology and preparing for future encounters. Schools introduced courses on xenobiology and interstellar diplomacy, ensuring that humanity wouldn't be caught off guard again. Yet beneath the surface of progress lay an undercurrent of unease. Everyone knew the arbiters, or something worse, would return. Alex spent his days training with military units, teaching them survival tactics he'd learned during the trial. He drilled soldiers on how to adapt quickly, emphasizing teamwork over brute force. "It's not about being stronger," he often said. "It's about being smarter." His lessons carried weight, especially when paired with demonstrations from Mia, who shared insights on alien ecosystems and the importance of understanding unfamiliar environments. Mia, meanwhile, worked tirelessly in labs, analyzing data collected during their ordeal. She collaborated with scientists worldwide, piecing together fragments of information about the biomechanical creatures and the arbiters themselves. Her findings painted a grim picture. These beings were not just advanced. They were deliberate, methodical, and far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Despite their efforts, neither Alex nor Mia could shake the feeling that humanity was still woefully unprepared. Late at night, they would sit together, discussing what might come next. "We can train people and build weapons," Alex said one evening, his voice heavy with doubt. "But none of that matters if we don't change how we think." Mia nodded, staring out the window at the darkened sky. "The Deathworlders didn't survive because of tools or plans," she replied softly. "They survived because they adapted to their world and made it part of them. We need to do the same." Unbeknownst to them, the Deathworlders continued to watch from afar. Jake Rivers and Clara Hayes submitted regular updates to their leaders, tracking humanity's progress with detached interest. "They're trying," Jake remarked during one report, flipping through holographic images of Earth's new defenses. "But effort doesn't mean success." Clara leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Do you think they'll make it?" she asked pointedly, her tone betraying a rare hint of curiosity. Jake shrugged, his expression unreadable. "Maybe. If they stop playing by rules that don't exist. Out here, there are no fair fights, no second chances unless you take them yourself." Farther still, beyond even the reach of the Deathworlders, the arbiters observed silently. Their glowing forms pulsed faintly as they processed data streaming in from Earth. Humanity's resilience intrigued them, but intrigue wasn't enough. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species vying for dominance. Weakness couldn't be tolerated, no matter how promising a species might seem. As time went on, Alex and Mia found themselves haunted by dreams of the trial, the labyrinthine canyon, the poisonous jungle, the biomechanical beasts. Each dream reminded them of the stakes, sharpening their resolve. They began reaching out to other survivors, forming a network of individuals determined to prepare humanity for whatever came next. Together, they trained, studied, and planned, knowing full well that preparation might not be enough. One night, as Alex stood alone on a hilltop, gazing at the stars, he whispered a silent promise. "We'll be ready," he murmured. Whether facing the Arbiters, the Deathworlders, or some unknown threat lurking in the darkness, humanity would endure. It had to. Somewhere far away, Jake chuckled softly, watching the latest transmission from Earth. "Good luck, kid," he muttered to himself. "You're gonna need it." And so, the galaxy turned, its endless cycle of challenges continuing unabated. Humanity had proven it could survive, but survival was only the beginning. The real tests were yet to come, and failure meant far more than extinction. It meant oblivion. The battlefield erupted into chaos as the biomechanical creatures surged forward, their movements precise and relentless. Each step they took shook the ground, sending tremors through the arena. Their weapons crackled with energy, firing bolts of light that tore through anything in their path. The survivors scattered, some diving for cover, while others returned fire with whatever weapons they had left. Alex Carter ducked behind a pile of rubble, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced over at Maya Lopez, who was crouched nearby, her face pale but determined. "We can't fight them head-on," she said quickly, her voice barely audible over the noise. "They're too strong." Alex nodded, scanning the battlefield for an opening. The Deathworlders were already in the thick of the fight, moving like forces of nature. Jake Rivers swung a heavy metal rod with brutal efficiency, smashing it against the joints of one creature until sparks flew. Clara Hayes darted around the larger foes, striking vulnerable spots with calculated precision. Neither showed any sign of fear or hesitation. They seemed to thrive in the chaos. Other teams weren't faring so well. A group of insectoids tried to swarm one of the biomechanical beasts, only to be incinerated by a single blast. The Hive Mind Collective attempted to use their mental connection to disable the machines, but their efforts were futile. The creature's systems were immune to psychic interference. One by one, the remaining contestants fell, their bodies crumpling under the relentless assault. Mia grabbed Alex's arm, pulling him toward a narrow gap between two fallen pillars. "We need to stay mobile," she urged. "If we keep moving, maybe we can find a weak spot." They moved carefully, staying low, and using the debris as cover. Every few seconds, Alex would peek out to assess the situation, his mind racing. He noticed something odd about the biomechanical creatures. They paused briefly after taking damage, as if recalibrating. "Their systems must have a delay," he whispered to Mia. "If we hit them fast enough, we might be able to overwhelm them." Mia's eyes lit up with understanding. "Divide and conquer," she said. "Let's split up and draw their attention." Before Alex could argue, she slipped away, darting toward a cluster of rocks where one of the creatures stood guard. She threw a piece of broken metal, creating a loud clang that drew its focus. As the machine turned toward her, Alex sprang into action, sprinting from the opposite direction, and slamming a makeshift weapon into its exposed joint. Sparks flew, and the creature staggered, giving Mia enough time to strike again. Meanwhile, the Deathworlders continued to dominate the battlefield. Jake laughed wildly, dodging attacks with ease. "Is this all you've got?" he shouted, taunting both the biomechanical beasts and the other survivors. Clara worked silently beside him, her movements fluid and deadly. Together, they dismantled one creature after another, leaving trails of wreckage in their wake. As the battle dragged on, exhaustion began to take its toll. Alex's arms ached, and Mia's breath came in ragged gasps, but they pushed through, relying on teamwork and sheer determination. When one of the biomechanical creatures cornered them, Alex used his last bit of strength to create an opening, allowing Mia to deliver a final blow that brought it crashing to the ground. By the time the dust settled, only 3 groups remained: humanity, the Deathworlders, and the Hive Mind Collective. The arena was littered with the remains of the fallen, the air thick with smoke and the smell of burnt metal. Alex leaned against a piece of debris, trying to catch his breath, while Maya checked their supplies, which were nearly depleted. Jake approached them, wiping blood off his hands. His grin was wide, though there was a flicker of respect in his eyes. "Not bad," he admitted grudgingly. "You lasted longer than I thought you would." Clara stood a few steps behind him, her expression unreadable. "Don't celebrate yet," she said quietly. "This isn't over." The Arbiter's voice echoed once more, cold and emotionless. "All participants have failed." However, they paused, their tone shifting slightly. "Humanity has earned recognition for its resilience." Alex and Mia exchanged a glance, unsure whether to feel relieved or uneasy. The Deathworlders simply chuckled, as if the outcome had been obvious all along. Whatever came next, one thing was certain: survival in this galaxy wouldn't come easy, but humanity had proven it could endure. The announcement from the Arbiters hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. "All participants have failed," their voice echoed once more, cold and devoid of emotion. "However, humanity has earned recognition for its resilience." Alex Carter stood still, his body aching from the battle but his mind racing. He glanced at Maya Lopez, who looked equally stunned. Recognition wasn't victory. It felt hollow, like being handed a consolation prize when survival was on the line. Around them, the other survivors reacted differently. The Hive Mind Collective pulsed with quiet anger, their shared thoughts creating an eerie hum that filled the arena. They didn't speak, but their frustration was palpable. Jake Rivers crossed his arms, leaning casually against a piece of debris, as if nothing had happened. Clara Hayes stood beside him, her expression calm but unreadable. Neither seemed surprised by the Arbiter's declaration. In fact, Jake chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Figures," he muttered under his breath. "They never play fair." "What do you mean?" Alex asked, unable to keep the question inside. His voice was rough, strained from shouting during the fight. Jake raised an eyebrow, giving Alex a sidelong glance. "Think about it, kid. This whole thing, the tests, the trials, it's not just about seeing who survives. It's about control. They want obedient little pawns, not winners." He gestured toward the crumbling battlefield around them. "Failure means you're weak. Survival means you're useful. Either way, they win." Mia frowned, stepping closer. "So what are you saying? That none of this mattered?" Clara spoke up before Jake could answer. Her tone was sharp but measured. "It matters, to them." She pointed upward, toward the glowing symbols etched into the walls of the arena. "But to us, it's just another game. Another test we've seen 100 times before." Her words sent a chill through Alex. If even the Deathworlders saw this as routine, then how much worse must their home planet be? What kind of life prepared someone to face horrors like this without blinking? As the Arbiters continued speaking, their voice grew distant, almost dismissive. "Humanity will be monitored. Your progress will determine your future standing among the stars." Before anyone could respond, the ground began to tremble again. The arena started to dissolve, the walls fading into swirling patterns of light. One by one, the remaining contestants disappeared, transported back to wherever they had come from. Alex reached out instinctively for Mia, gripping her hand tightly as the world around them blurred and shifted. When the light faded, they found themselves standing on Earth, surrounded by familiar landscapes. The sky was clear, the air crisp and clean. For a moment, neither of them moved, overwhelmed by the sudden return to normalcy. Then, slowly, Alex let out a shaky breath. "We made it," he said quietly. Mia nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "For now. But this isn't over. Whatever those Arbiters wanted, they'll be watching." Back on their homeworld, Jake and Clara reported to their own leaders, detailing everything they had observed. Their superiors listened intently, nodding occasionally as Jake described humanity's ingenuity and teamwork. When he finished, one of the elders leaned forward, steepling his fingers thoughtfully. "Interesting," he said. "Perhaps Earth holds more potential than we realized." Clara added her thoughts, her tone cautious. They're resourceful, yes, but untested on a larger scale. If we decide to ally with them, or eliminate them, we'll need to act carefully. The elder smiled faintly, his gaze distant. Then let's give them time. Let's see how they handle the lessons they've learned. Far away, in the vastness of space, the arbiters watched silently, their glowing forms flickering faintly. Humanity had proven itself capable of enduring hardship, but the galaxy was full of dangers far greater than any trial. The real tests were only beginning, and failure would no longer come with warnings. For now, Alex and Mia rested, grateful to be alive. But deep down, they both knew peace was temporary. And somewhere out there, the Deathworlders chuckled, already planning their next move. Back on Earth, Alex Carter and Mia Lopes became symbols of hope and resilience. News of their survival spread quickly, thanks to the Arbiter's monitoring systems that broadcast fragments of the trial across global networks. People marveled at their ingenuity and teamwork, hailing them as heroes who had faced unimaginable odds and lived to tell the tale. Governments and scientists scrambled to analyze every detail, searching for ways to prepare humanity for whatever might come next. But fame brought its own challenges. Reporters camped outside their homes, eager for interviews. Politicians invited them to meetings, hoping to extract insights about alien technology or strategies. Alex tried to keep a low profile, uncomfortable with the attention, while Mia embraced it cautiously, using her platform to advocate for better research into xenobiology and interstellar threats. "We got lucky," she told the crowd during one speech. "Next time, we won't have that luxury." Despite the chaos surrounding them, Alex and Mia couldn't shake the memories of the trial or the Deathworlders. Jake Rivers' words echoed in Alex's mind. Asterisk, this isn't over. Asterisk, he found himself replaying moments from the arena, wondering if humanity truly understood the scale of what lay ahead. The Arbiters weren't just testing them, they were preparing them for something bigger, something darker. One evening, as they sat together on a quiet hill overlooking the city, Mia broke the silence. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked softly, her eyes fixed on the stars above. Alex hesitated before answering. "Not if, but when," he said finally. "Those arbiters didn't bring us there just to say we passed or failed. They're watching us now, waiting to see what we do next." Mia nodded slowly. "And the Deathworlders, they know more than they let on." Her words lingered between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Neither doubted that Jake and Clara had submitted reports to their own people, detailing humanity's strengths and weaknesses. What those reports meant for Earth's future was anyone's guess. Meanwhile, light years away, Jake and Clara stood in a dimly lit chamber, presenting their findings to the council of their homeworld. Holographic images floated in the air, showing snapshots of the trial. Alex and Mia working together, the hive mind collective crumbling under pressure, the biomechanical creatures tearing through lesser opponents. Jake spoke plainly, his tone devoid of emotion. "Humans are clever," he said. "They adapt quickly and rely on each other. But they're soft, used to safety nets they won't have out here." Clara stepped forward, adding her perspective. "Their potential is undeniable. With the right guidance or pressure, they could become allies worth having, or enemies worth eliminating." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Finally, the elder who had spoken earlier leaned back in his chair, stroking his chin thoughtfully. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very well. We'll monitor them closely. For now, let them believe they've earned a reprieve. When the time comes, we'll decide whether to extend a hand or a blade." As the meeting concluded, Jake and Clara exited the chamber, their footsteps echoing down the cold, metallic halls. "You really think they'll survive?" Clara asked after a moment, her voice tinged with curiosity. Jake smirked, shrugging nonchalantly. "Doesn't matter what I think. Survival isn't about thinking, it's about doing. If they can handle themselves when the arbiters come knocking again, maybe they'll earn our respect. Until then, he trailed off, his grin widening. Let's just say I'm not holding my breath. Back on Earth, Alex stared at the night sky, feeling a strange mix of determination and dread. Humanity had proven it could endure, but endurance wasn't victory. Somewhere beyond the stars, forces far greater than the arbiters were observing, waiting, planning. And when the next test came, failure wouldn't just mean extinction, it would mean erasure. For now, though, all they could do was prepare and hope.